At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Sophia, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am very well, and it's an honor to be on your show, and I want to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to be on your show.
Well, I'm excited. Once I saw what your background is, I thought, wow, this could make a very interesting discussion. And I'd love for you to share with the audience, what is your background and, the story behind where you got to this point.
Okay, absolutely. So currently, I'm a certified EFT practitioner. I'm trauma informed. And after 14 years of a chronic disabling illness, with the use of EFT and hacking realities, which is a technique, I healed myself. I also have a background in public health epidemiology. And I was also a network engineer for Novell. And I think the combination of both has allowed me and to help other individuals to deal with their challenges. And furthermore, I'm trauma informed. I am also a NCS trainer for Dr. Joe Dispenza. NCS stands for Neurochange Solutions.
Okay. And when you talk about EFT, could you explain to the audience what that stands for?
Okay. EFT is emotional freedom techniques, and it's a modality between cognitive therapy, and we tap on the body's meridians, which is the acupuncture points, to move and release energy.
And when you compare cognitive to EFT, I know I was reading some studies on it, and it was suggesting that actually EFT can be more effective, and they've actually shown that scientifically, research-wise, that it's more effective than the cognitive, which is you're just kind of going back and forth, talking, whereas this gets very pointed. Can you share a little bit of your thoughts on that?
Yes, well, you're absolutely right. The clinical trials, first of all, have shown it downregulates 6 genes of stress. One of them is cortisol. And the reason for it is because EFT is both a mental practice, but also a somatic practice. Mostly we're somatic because we want to feel the energy. And as human beings, we have 3 bodies: mind, body, spirit. So we are releasing the energy by voicing what is our challenge. And that is why EFT is very effective. It's the somatic part that usually challenges us. And by tapping, because where is emotion stored? Emotions are stored in the body.
Right.
So emotions are energy in motion. And what is energy? Is information. So when the energy gets blocked in the body, then we have a lowering of frequency, which we call dis-ease. The body is not at ease.
So when you help someone with that, how do you go about doing that? I mean, what is the process of helping them to tap? And, obviously you're dealing with people who have some real subconscious imprints in their lives, right? That is causing all sorts of issues. So I'm curious how EFT, how do you use that in a way that helps them to start to, and the question is, do they eliminate or do they just put it to the side and change their neural balance within the brain so that it's, not so much that way? How does that work?
So let's discuss what traumatic memories are. Memories are held between neurons. Okay, what is holding a traumatic memory? Traumatic memory is not a processed, properly time-stamped memory in the hippocampus, and it's the emotion and the story that's holding it. So once we start feeling that energy and we release it, that memory can be refiled properly, because the person usually has what we call a cognitive shift. They realize it from a higher level of consciousness. And so once the charge is released, now we can refile the memory, but we can take it even further. So there's a modality most people know as matrix reimprinting. It just because I got trained with someone else, we can't use the same title. It's hacking realities. So we said before that memories are stored between two neurons, and what fires together wires together. So after the emotional charge, if we prune those neurons and we keep on reimprinting a new memory, which is what we do with hacking realities, that story changes and that experience in the body also changes.
So when you talk about hacking reality, is that something similar to NLP, where they take you back to a certain event and then reframe that and then bring you forward again? Or how does that work?
It's close. It's a little different. They take you back into the memory, but we still have to tap for that experience. We still have to release that emotion. So once the lesson is learned and once the emotion is released, then we can reframe it and then ask the person how they would have liked that to end. As long as the lesson and the experience is learned, we can reframe it, but we can't do it if there's an emotional charge. And why can we do it? Because this universe is a holographic universe, right? And our experience is a projection of our mind. So if that has been healed, we actually shift to a parallel timeline. That's what's actually happening.
I mean, it's here now, but it's parallel because it's different than what we were on. Is that right?
Correct.
And how does meditation, I know that you've worked with Joe Dispenza and they're actually a trainer. How does that work with meditation? And we'll get into meditation a little bit further down the road, but how does the EFT and what you're doing combine with meditation, or does it even combine with meditation?
They do combine. And I will give you some information that Dr. Joe discusses at the event. So what is meditation? At least Dr. Joe wants to call it mental rehearsal. So we keep on replaying how we'd like an event to become, or what we would like to manifest with the emotion. Remember, always the key is the emotion. It's the emotion that gives it the charge, because the thought gives the signal and the emotion draws the experience back to you. The thought is electric and the emotion is electromagnetic, which is it draws it back to you. Now let's discuss, why do we know this is effective? He discussed at his week-longs, and I know you went, the concept of the piano experiment. So they took two groups of people who were going to do a 5-finger sequence, playing something on the piano. And both of the groups did not know how to use a typewriter, type, or ever had played the piano. And the one group played the piano for 2 days. We gave them a sequence. They gave them a sequence for 2 hours a day. And on the 5th day, they went to play. The second group was, they mentally rehearsed in their brain what that sequence was without touching the piano keys. On the 5th day, they went to perform. The brain scans indicated there was cortical activity in the brain equally as the ones with the people who physically practice on the piano. What does it tell us? The body doesn't know the difference if the experience they're having is real or it's created by thought alone. That's why we use meditation. That's exactly what we do in EFT in hacking realities. Once the charge is removed, they keep on visualizing with emotion and replaying how they would have liked this outcome to take place.
Okay. And how do they keep replaying that? I mean, you know, if you're working with someone and, well, I guess first of all, what are the symptoms? What is the reason that someone would come to you, for instance, and say, "Hey, I really need some help"? What is the symptoms of people that they're experiencing that they finally get to the point to say, "I need some help"?
I have a variation of people who come to me. people with attention deficit disorder, people who experience panic attacks, people who want to change their reality. They're not happy with what their reality is. And a lot of people with health challenges. I had a lady who had Tourette's. And by combining hacking realities and EFT, we did what they call a birth reimprint. She saw how it got created. And I'm going to elaborate so you can explain. And then
Okay.
her Tourette's went away. So the person was told that at the age of 3, she started having the Tourette's symptoms. So for whatever reason, intuitively, I just knew the age of 3 was not accurate. And so we started tapping on the now, and I had recommended that we do what they call a birth reimprint. And the person who actually does it is a Dr. Joe student. She's the one who originally taught it. She's the one who wrote the book. And we took her back to before she was born, the first trimester, the second trimester. At the second trimester, she had the awareness that her father was beating her mother on the side of the crib. As a result, the child was shaking. Once she had that cognitive shift, her symptoms alleviated. That was a big thing for her. And we re-imprinted her. So when we do the re-imprint, we just take an image with the emotion and the new belief, and the person does a mental rehearsal. After they're done with their session, they don't have to do the whole elaborate process, but for 5 minutes a day, preferably when you're in alpha or theta brainwaves, keep on re-imprinting for, depends on the person. Some people it's 20 days, for other people it's 30 days, re-imprint that new memory. And then that's what takes you off on another trajectory.
Well, and when you say a picture, are you just saying, all right, for the new memory, we want you to picture in your mind something, and then that's the picture we want you to see
Right.
all of the time?
The client selects one picture frame, and the client selects the emotion and the new belief. But again, all three have to take place once the emotional charge is healed. In this particular case, the pain and anguish that she had, the condition, the anger she had towards the dad, doing that towards the mom's fear in her body because she was pregnant, worried that she's going to lose her child. So once those emotions get cleared, then she can re-imprint. She can't do that, he or she can't do that before.
Okay. And, you know, what's fascinating to me, you talk about her experience in the second trimester. Now, I have had a similar experience, different modality, but going back within the womb and remembering what my mom had been saying to my dad, which I kind of connect with my dad to the point where I realized that was a negative thought that I've had my whole life. And it goes back to that very instance. Now, as I've been looking and studying a little bit more and doing a little bit more research, one of the things I find is there's also the DNA memory. Mm-hmm. You've got that DNA memory that can come up and create those subconscious negative belief systems, and you have no clue where that came from. Have you found that as you're doing that, you start to discover where that came from, or is it just the fact that it's there, accept that it's there, and then let's move forward and reframe that?
We have both situations. So a lot of times when the emotional charge is healed, we will figure out where it came from. Other times, for whatever reason, I think the soul decides that. I don't have an answer on that. Other times, as long as it's happening in the now and you're clearing it from the now, you're actually clearing it from other timelines, because all timelines are happening in the now and they're all connected. So I don't know why some people remember where it came from and why some other people don't. I have a client that she remembered something that was happening in her personal life took place in some other timeline. So, and so we had to work on that timeline to clear it. I don't always go digging because then it gets complicated with the person. If it comes naturally, that is fine. We can ask the person, do you feel this is yours? Do you feel it's coming from another timeline? And if they get no answer, we just start working and clearing in the now.
Well, and as you talk about that and meditation, I know that there are so many stories about people who are experiencing health issues that are literally being healed through meditation. And you're talking about EFT. I've never experienced the EFT part of it, but can you explain, some stories about that and how does that work? Because I know when you go to Dr. Joe's, week-long event, that's all you hear about is people who are being healed. And to me, having a medical background, it's a little bit tough to understand and to even accept. And yet I know it's happening.
Well, we both have a somewhat of a medical background because I have a master's in epidemiology. So when we have an analytical mind, we find it very hard to understand how it heals. Let's address first what we're healing and how it's happening.
Okay.
We are not healing this body. We're changing our frequency and we're moving to a very close parallel reality that the body is healed because that personality does not have the same emotional charge. Now I'm going to bring another concept that you may not be familiar. So there's the double slit experiment and the double slit, they call it eraser, goes back in time and rewrites the past. Okay, when is the past being created? I know it's going to sound very strange for your audience. The past is being created in the now. It's not created in the past because every time you change, your story gets rewritten. And I'm going to give you an analogy. Let's say you wrote a play. And in this play, the person has been suffering all their life or whatever, and they've been ill. But now you decided to create this person as super healthy. So we go and change and rewrite the previous script. So it confirms to that reality. That's exactly what is happening to us. Now, what is causing the disease? Well, stored anger. Let's talk what pneumonia is. Pneumonia is powerlessness. The liver holds anger. The kidneys hold fear, right? So if these emotions get stuck in the body, and you have a medical background, you know that the body sends signal and there's a voltage between the cells. There's an electrical charge that needs to go. But if there's gaps or there's some sort of a blockage or an acidification, that message is not going to go through. Remember the old batteries that we put in the Walkman and we left it there and they acidified and the Walkman stopped working?
Right.
Same thing with us. So our job is now to release that story that we were not able to handle when we were growing up. Because when did these imprints happen? They're either coming from another lifetime, and we got a trigger in this one, from the ages of 1 to 7. Sometimes it could be a little longer because we had subconscious brainwaves. So we were absorbing constantly what we were seeing. There was no conscious mind to say, no, this is not me. I'm not, or we couldn't even stand up. So a child who wasn't able to speak up, very likely, or their voice wasn't heard, probably they're going to have Hashimoto's or some sort of something with their throat. Okay, we need to know the whole story before we can decide what it is, but it's going to affect the fifth energy center, as Dr. Joe calls it. So now we go back, and that person, which is you, frozen, the hologram is frozen, that echo is frozen, that needs to voice and release it. But first it has to clear the emotion to stand up in its power. And once that gets released with the mental rehearsal, that's where EFT comes in. EFT releases the charge, the emotional charge, so you can do mental rehearsal, because there's no way you're going to believe or do mental rehearsal if you're in beta brainwaves. Let's say you were attacked, and as soon as you go to that memory, you're in panic and fear. No matter how much mental rehearsal you're going to do, you're not going to overcome it. So we need to release that fear that was stored in the body. Once it's released, now you can go and do your meditation mental rehearsal. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah. So what you're saying, because I've not heard this before, but what you're suggesting is that in order to really effectively meditate, we've got to do an EFT process first in order to have meditation even more effective. Is that correct?
Correct, but it doesn't have to be EFT. Some somatic modality that you can release the emotion. Because what does Dr. Joe teaches? You need to master and overcome the body. He's referring to emotions. So how do you overcome and master your body if you don't know how to do it and you're constantly getting in a freeze response? Right? So it could be breath work. It could be Dr. Levine's method. He has something similar, some somatic experience where you actually feel and observe your emotions. The Buddha talked about observing and letting go of your emotions. What's holding us back is the thoughts and the emotions. And it's the emotions that hold the thoughts and the beliefs. So once the emotions are released, the thoughts fall apart, which is why some of us take a long time to heal. Some people, they're ready, they know how to master the emotions, and the healing is instantaneous.
Well, and yeah, you talked about what this other doctor was saying, what he was suggesting. Then you talk about EFT, and then you talk about Buddha. But Buddha, as much as I've studied him, he's got the 8 path that you follow, but I'm not sure that totally releases emotions. So, for the audience, again, kind of reiterate, what are some of the processes that they can go through very specifically in order to release the emotions so that their meditation becomes more effective?
Okay, so the research has shown EFT is the fastest, but it has to match with what the client believes. So it's not a modality for everyone, even though there has been no downside to EFT. A lot of people may not like EFT because once you start, your emotions start coming up. They just keep on coming up, and it takes a little while to control them. So there's breath work, there's somatic experiences, and of course, the very famous Peter Levine. Whichever way, there's one more that Dr. David Hawkins talks about, the Sedona method. That is another method about letting go of emotions. So whatever modality you pick to release your emotions, that would be the best. I personally pick EFT because it's the fastest and it has shown to downregulate the stress. I forgot my word. My brain stopped. Downregulates the stress genes.
Okay. So can an individual do EFT on their own, or do they need a practitioner?
So in the beginning, they would need a practitioner. Traumatic experiences are not suggested to be worked on their own because the mind that created it cannot solve the problem. But for simple stuff, yes, in EFT, one thing we do is we teach the individual to be able to tap by themselves. And we actually want them to tap on the little things, or it could be a little bit more serious things, on their own or in between the sessions, because the tapping by itself brings the body into the present moment. So yes, it's a modality that down the road they can use by themselves. They can start on their own. There is no harm to EFT. It's just not going to be so easy to tap on your traumatic memories because you're going to see it by yourself. I mean, what is this reality? This is a reality that we chose to experience. And ultimately, we are meant to either forgive the experiences or let them go. So someone who's very angry and hurt, they won't be able to do that in the beginning. And we don't do that in EFT in the beginning. We meet them where they are. It's a process that the person learns and they let go of that story.
Okay, so let's talk about meditation, because I know a lot of times people are sharing stories, and we've heard them all at some of these workshops and so forth, where people are literally being healed through their meditation, or you have other people that are getting together as a group and sending forth that energy of healing, and that's also happening. So how does that work when, if we're just talking about meditation itself, how does that healing process, whether it's the emotional healing or whether it's even the physical healing of the body, how does that work based on your experience?
Okay, so where is the condition stored? The condition is stored in the light body, because the light body is projecting the experience. So they're not stored in the body, even though it feels that it's stored in this body. It's in the light body. What caused the disease? The lowering of frequency. So let's take the first scenario, where the person, for whatever reason, can believe as real 100% with no doubt, believe. So they have a thought and they have the joy or the gratitude of being healed in the now. If they can sustain that, the body gets a biological upgrade. It's a biological upgrade in frequency, right? So it's the frequency we want to raise. And the emotion of gratitude, joy, or wholeness is that heals the body. Now let's discuss the concept of coherence healing. The person's field is low due to whatever stories and experiences they have. The healers transmit energy outside of the reality, the person's field, before it enters the reality, and we're raising their frequency. If the individual is open, we're sending them the high frequency. Assuming the individual is open, they're going to receive that frequency, which again upregulates, and they get a biological upgrade for the body. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the questions that I do have is, when we talk about the healing, I know that you can talk about the different types of things. If you're going to not do just breath work, let's say that you're going to actually listen to some type of music or whatever. You have all sorts of approaches now that are being promoted, and I don't know how valid they are. What's your thought on this? Because I never heard Dr. Joe talk about it much. The binaural beats versus the solfeggio beats versus the hemisync. Any of those really important to be aware of?
Yes. Well, if I recall well what he said, those help, but they take much longer. Remember, the emotion is the strongest component. If you keep on playing these beats, and the binaural synchronize the brain, okay? And you're still angry and you're still bitter because you can't let go of the story, there's no healing that's going to take place. Because what's creating the disease? What does Dr. Joe teach? Your personality creates your personal reality. How you think, how you act, and how you feel. All of those need to shift. So if your thinking is angry and you're feeling bitter and you're behaving like a bitter person, you might get some relief from the binaural beats or whatever, the solfeggio frequencies, but you're not going to heal unless the personality changes. Because who is having the disease? What you're believing that you are. Your true self doesn't have the illness. The reason we have the illness is because we're believing we're this. I'm believing I'm Sophia. You're believing you're Dr. Doug. The true self is having a laugh out there.
How do we change that reality within ourselves, within our mind or within our heart or wherever that comes from?
How we think, how we act, and how we feel, which is why feeling and thinking, those two are addressed by EFT.
Okay.
So EFT addresses automatically two of the components, not just one, which is why it works faster. And then you have to start behaving like that person.
All right. So people who are starting to meditate, they're gonna learn about just the breath work type of meditation. They're gonna learn about maybe listening to music. If they get into the frequencies of the binaural, that's another thing. But how do they literally, if they're starting to meditate, and maybe they're going to use EFT or whatever? How important is it, for instance, to have guided meditation? I know that, both of us going to those, week-long things, there's just a horrendous amount of guided meditation. And sometimes I question, and there's my analytical mind, sometimes I question the value of guided meditation because it's going in a direction that they seem to want you to go. And I don't know if that becomes more individualized or what.
Well, it's an easy one to start, the guided meditation, because what are you trying to do in meditation? Let's put the mental rehearsal at the end. First, you're trying to see what is your body feeling. When people start meditation, the chatter is incessant. If they're having physical symptoms, they get amplified, right? So we want to observe what crazy thoughts or whatever thoughts are interfering, and what is the body feeling? If the body wants to get up, that means it's impatient. So you already identified the emotion. Or if it's constantly commenting, that could be perhaps judgment. So in meditation, when you first start, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be any kind of meditation. You start seeing those weird thoughts or those thoughts that you do not wish to engage. Now you have a set of tools. You also have a set of tools what the body is saying. So the meditation is meant to ultimately master the mind and body, right? So what does Joe teach? He wants you to become no thing, nowhere, in no time. So he doesn't want you to be connected. Now, when you're disconnected from the avatar, now you can reprogram yourself any way you want. So that's one way of doing it. Some people who are more skilled or who know how to master their bodies, they may decide to choose a silent meditation where they can direct their consciousness to whatever it is that they want. They could just go into the void and just start mentally rehearsing what it is that they want. So I don't have a perfect answer, but either form of meditation is going to be helpful to the individual.
Well, and I know a lot of people start to repeat affirmations when they're meditating. If they're not listening to a guided meditation, they may do affirmations. But as I've studied affirmations and the words that we use, I find that can be so important. Do you have any thoughts about that, or do you help your people to do some affirmations?
Yes.
And if so, what are the positive types of words to use for affirmations or phrases? And what are the ones that actually work against themselves?
Okay, so let's discuss the concept of affirmation. All language has a frequency. So I'm going to beat you up is a low frequency word, right? But let's discuss first, how do affirmations work? They have to come in and pass the brainstem. Now, if you are fearful or you're in a rage, and I tell you, calm down, you're great and you're wonderful, no matter what I say, is not going to help. What determines that? It's your brain waves. When you're angry, you're in beta brain waves. So no new information can come into your body. I don't care if you're listening it for 24 hours, as long as you're in beta brain waves. But now let's assume you are in alpha, theta, or whatever other brain waves, right? Now the affirmation, the positive affirmation is going to work. Now in EFT, we have a positive modality tapping. After you clear the negative charge, you'll tap, I'm so grateful that I have this. I am so happy and relieved. And so now you're doing another thing. You're tapping it so you can store it in your body. Right? So we do have that, and affirmations can be very powerful. We want affirmations that imply you already have it in the now, and the emotion is of a positive emotion and high frequency. Now let's talk about, let's say, an intention. I want to heal my cancer. That in reality is not a positive affirmation. I want is wanting. You'll always stay in wanting. You put the word cancer in there, it's a low frequency emotion. It's not going to work. But to say, I am happy and grateful that my body is whole and I feel all this joy. Now that is a positive affirmation. Does that make sense?
Well, it does, and I think about that, and for instance, as I have some knee problems, so as I'm doing my walking meditation or whatever, and I'm thinking, I'm grateful that my body is whole, and yet I know it's not. So how do we overcome that present knowledge or belief and experience, and then get into that other realm where literally we are experiencing a different body, we're experiencing a different experience in general?
So when you go to your walking meditation, which is why I discussed EFT in the beginning, and your body is not whole. What is holding? First of all, the experience is holding the belief, right? Because your body is not whole. But there's a second component. There's probably an emotion, there's an emotion of anger or disappointment why your body is doing it, right? So as long as there's a charge, that belief is going to stay in place. But if you knew and believed in your bones that your body's a projection of the mind, and you released all those other emotions, then you can sustain and self-correct. I am whole and I'm wonderful. My body feels at ease, which is how those instantaneous healings take place. And I want to bring in another concept. There's the maps of consciousness from Dr. David Hawkins. So he has a logarithmic scale of all the emotions. And the ones that do unconditional healing, it vibrates at 540. On the logarithmic scale is 540, which is joy or unconditional love. If you can, actually, it's just joy. When you can vibrate at 540 for a long sustained period of time, it's a matter of time before the body heals. What happens is we do the meditation and we fall back to our old self. Or when we're doing the meditation, we can't sustain that emotion of joy having healed. So you end up being frustrated after the meditation because you say, well, how can I feel exactly what you said? How can I feel whole if my body's still showing the symptoms? But if you had removed, and I'm not picking on you, I'm talking in general because
I'm using me as because it's good for me to be an example.
When you have released all the emotional attachments and judgment towards the body and yourself of why you're experiencing it, then you'll be able to enter the joy. And which is why, again, I'm going to bring you to some modality that's going to heal or release those emotions.
All right. And I think that becomes the key, is to have some kind of modality. And as you say, whether it's breath work, and when you talk about breath work, what are you talking about as a modality for releasing?
Oh, well, there's a lot of people. There's the soma breath. There's the transformational breath. All of them have, the majority have in key that the breath goes into the belly. Because where is these low frequency emotions? According to the maps of consciousness, they line up with the energy centers. Most low frequency emotions is in the first 3 energy centers, which fall just above your belly button. So the 4th one is the heart. So the 3 are below, which is why we want to bring the breath into the belly. Because the breath is awareness. Breath is spirit. So people who do breath work, I've done some, when you keep on doing it continuously, the chatter in the brain stops, and then the emotions start getting released, because breath is a higher frequency than the lower frequency motion that's stored in the body, which is why in breath work, you might start seeing people who are screaming or crying or whatever it is. There's the also famous holotropic breath work from Stan Graf. He has a particular breath work because he could not use LSD. He had started with LSD, that he would take him through 12-hour sessions of breath work, and people would become pure consciousness and heal. I think it's called the Stan Graf breath work. They have variations of it. There's the holotropic breath. There's many types of breath. There's breath work that releases DMT. So the role of breath work is, number one, to bring awareness and then release emotions. What I have found with breath work is we usually have resistance in doing it. We feel we can't breathe, and that's how I started. So when we are in negative, low frequency emotions, we usually just breathe towards the chest. We don't bring consciously our breath into the belly. And
so that goes back to EFT. So that gets to be very, very curious. So when you work with people, or even on your, and what is your website? So if people are seeking to find you, what is your website? How do they find you?
My website is tapintoyourbestself.com. And if the person is interested, they could just have a 20-minute complimentary session to understand what tapping is.
Now, do you do videos or anything to help train people on how to do EFT on their own if they're not able to work with you directly?
What I do is usually if they have a couple of sessions, by the second session, I've already taught them how to do EFT on their own. What I can do, and it's very helpful, I can record the session and then they can keep on practicing on their own. There is no harm going over through the whole process. Tapping regulates the body. Just the physical tapping, the touch, makes the body feel safe, because you feel your hands on your chest or wherever it is, and it brings you unconsciously to the present moment.
So are there specific locations that you want to tap? For those that are listening on audio, they're not going to see this, but so if you can explain a little bit more. I know on video, I see you tapping your hand.
Tap at your karate point, that we call it the karate chop. This changes the polarity in the body, and we usually tap 3 times with the sentence here. Then we go here. We go between.
Which is the top of your head.
Yes, the top of your head.
And then
the side of the eyes.
Uh-huh.
In between your eyebrows. Under the eyes. Under your nose, your chin. There's one by your breast line, your bra line.
Uh-huh.
And then under your breast. So
okay.
Under where a woman's breast is, where her bra is, under that, and that's the liver spot. I believe this is the small bowel, the small intestine, if I remember well. So each one has a corresponding point to the acupuncture meridian. And a lot of people, I personally use this one and this one, because you as a doctor know there's a lot of meridian lines that come this way. So we want to capture as many meridians that we can. And if it's anger, for example, I will be tapping under my bra line because I'm having anger. I know the liver holds anger. So I want to start, just imagine you got a calcification, right? And let's say your hand is a hammer. And you're just keep on tapping on the liver. You're breaking that calcification, that acidity, you're breaking it down. And by voicing why you're angry or having your story heard, you're finally letting it go. And the body's going to take care of the rest for you.
Well, and how long do you actually do the EFT? How long of a session is that usually?
I do 90-minute sessions. I think they're more efficient And the majority of the European practitioners tend to do 90-minute sessions. And that's what we do, because we don't want just to tap. We want to bring them at a very positive state at the end and then go about their day. So, I don't know if you know, in the old days, people went to therapy and the session was 50 minutes. And while they were starting to warm up, the session was over.
Right.
Okay. And they'd say, well, next week. Well, by next week, 150 million things happen. So we want ample time, because the subconscious is not going to blurt right away what the issue is. And sometimes the person doesn't know. So they're developing trust with me, and then we work. And if I'm going to do a re-imprint, I want to re-imprint something positive, and I may include a positive tapping affirmation for them. Now they can go about their day and feel uplifted.
So if I'm going to try to do that on my own, I need to allow for 60 to 90 minutes of tapping.
When you do something on your own, let's say you're angry about something, once you are experienced, it usually takes about 20 minutes, because it's usually one specific incident, a small incident you're working. So 15 to 20 minutes is ample time for you to work on one issue.
Okay. And there is no question that science has shown that EFT is more effective than any other modalities. Okay. So let's remind the people, how do they find you?
They can come to tapintourbestself.com. I'd be happy to talk to them and educate them free of charge. And there's tons of information on my website, some clinical trials and a lot of information. But what I want to give the listener is whatever challenge they have, it can be solved. For every problem, there's a solution. So if you've got this negative label from a physician or someone else, it doesn't mean that's going to be the end of you. How many people do we know have healed from cancer? One moment is there and the next moment it's gone. So we want to help individuals know that they can resolve these issues. It might take some time, but they can.
Oh, I love it. This has just been amazing, Sophia. This has just been amazing. I really appreciate your insights. And obviously, you've had so many experiences in your life of being able to help people. I think that's just magnificent.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show and be able to speak to your audience. It was a pleasure and joy for me to talk to your audience.
You bet. And folks, thanks for listening. Hope you really enjoyed it. Look forward to having you join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.